Welcome to Antune. This episode will focus on the B minor Prelude by Frédéric Chopin. Unlike most of the others, Chopin builds the melodic line in the left hand in this prelude. It's contrasted by the meditative pulsating on the right hand. Let's quickly start off with the left hand. Take a look at the first phrase. We must consider two factors when learning the left hand here: the slurs and the dynamics. These are the tools that will help us to play melodic and expressive. In the first two bars, we have a subphrase that starts and finishes softly. The climax point of it is the second beat in the first bar. It creates a strong impulse on which the melody lingers while going away. The wrist movements will enable us to naturally control the phrasing. I will start with a half-circular wrist movement. Then I will bounce my wrist with the following three beats. The point of bouncing is to get a fuller tone and put more emphasis on the longer notes. In my opinion, the 16th note is more of an ornamental element here. I recommend playing it with a gentle touch. And finish the melody with another circular movement. First, try to master this section, as the way we approach these two bars will remain for most of the piece. Keep your wrist flexible, and you will be able to control the dynamics. It's all about adjusting the level of resistance in the wrist. More resistance means more sound. Try to play very connected and bring the melody to the highest point. And then go away. The following two bars are pretty similar. The only difference is that the climax is a little higher here. Perhaps it asks for a little more effort to reach it. Let's use the same wrist movements and increase the dynamics a bit more. In the next four bars, the climax tone is even higher than before, and the melody is more extended. I will increase the intensity in dynamics to make it even harder to reach. Then bounce on each quarter note. And then I follow the direction of the melody with the wrist in three circular movements. I suggest bouncing on the quarter notes also to produce a beautiful sound. I'm afraid a direct attack wouldn't help with that. Try to go deep into the key and imagine pushing your wrist upwards with your fingertips. It's a compound movement where the arm and the finger work simultaneously, while the wrist is relaxed. With the 8 notes, we can connect more of them under a single motion. Therefore, I implement the circular movement, which is another way of producing a natural tone. I drove half a circle with my wrist depending on the direction of the melody. Now, let's play the whole phrase. Imagine these three melodies as the steps, each of them higher than the previous. Let's bring the phrase to its highest point by walking the steps, and then finish it softly. Now let's take a look at the right hand. It's written in two layers: the motif of repeated 8 notes and harmonic accompaniment. I like to play the upper layer slightly more exposed, and I take into account the accent in the first 8th note. The bottom layer which reflects the harmonic feeling of this texture, it's a little softer. Here, we need a motion that can help with the sound and consistency in this texture. Consistency is essential, because the motif is repeated almost throughout the entire piece. It is the texture that can put the listener in a hypnotic state. With the bottom layer, try pulling the keys gently towards yourself. In the upper layer, pulling is more abrupt and intense, because we have an accent. On the second eighth note, I touch the key very gently, with the slightest movement. Pull, release, pull, release, pull, release. Now let's play both layers together. Try to keep the upper one brighter. Here we have the only right hand melody of the piece, so let's try something special. The melodic layer is created out of double notes, single notes, and chords. It is essential to highlight the top voice of the double notes and the chords, since there is the main melody. Try leaning slightly to the right with your hand to expose the upper layer. Keep an eye on playing the other notes softer, or keep an ear. The bottom layer is only about accompaniment. Try sort of weightlessly caressing the keys. In my opinion, there are three main points in this melody. Try implementing the pulling technique when playing them. The first beat is the most significant one. Then less, and even less. The rest just follows the direction of the melody. Depending on the way it moves, I will increase and decrease the dynamics. Take your time and try first to get as comfortable as you can with playing hands separately. When you put them together, try to keep your right hand softer, as it has the accompaniment role. But do bring out the melody in the 7th bar and let it shortly take the lead. The expression is sotto voce, whispering. There are different ways of phrasing, which you can choose depending on the kind of story you want to tell. One option is to consider the first beat of the 2nd bar as the climax, and develop the melody around this note by increasing and decreasing the dynamic. Which does make sense, because it is the longest note of the melody. The other option is to consider the 2nd beat of the 1st bar as the climax tone, and decrease the dynamics with the rest. Also makes sense because the quarter note is the highest tone in the melody. It is musically logical to release the intensity after a climax. I think we can find the answer in the last motif, because it is very much depends on what you want to say there. You can tell a tragic story with a dramatic character, tragedy can be more like silent tears. The first option could be combined with the other first option, where we highlight the first beat of the second bar. As a first beat, it makes space for a bigger dynamic flow and intensity. It will work exceptionally well with the dramatic character. However, the tragedy I imagine in this story is more quiet and fragile. Therefore, I will combine the second options, where the melody is getting shyer after the second beat, which makes the whole phrase more personal and intimate. Let's talk about pedaling. If you want to be generous with it, you can change it with the first and third beats in the first and third bars, while keeping it for the whole duration in the second and fourth bar. If you prefer to have less blur and more transparent sound, you can simply change it on every beat. Both options are theoretically correct, as we don't mix up any harmony. In the next 4 bars, the melody and the harmony are constantly changing. For the first 5 beats, I recommend changing the pedal in each of them, and from there on, changing it every half beat. I also like to stretch the timing a little bit at the end of the phrase. Let's move on to the following phrase. The first motif is repeated identically, and I would play it with a similar intention. The second motif is a little different. Here Chopin suggests increasing the dynamics towards the first beat of the next bar, which melodically makes sense because it moves upwards. Besides, he didn't ask for decrescendo either, as he has in the previous motifs. In this case, we keep the dynamic intensity without fading away, or at least not much. Then he finishes the phrase with 2 small motifs, where the dynamics are forte and piano, each also equipped with a crescendo. It feels like the second motif is a reflection of the first one. Now let's play with both hands. Also here, I like to stretch the timing a tiny bit in the last bar. In the last phrase, we have a new element. A variation of the right hand's beautiful melody in the 7th bar is now transferred to the left hand, giving a totally different taste. Remember how we phrased this motif earlier? More emphasis on the first and a little less on the third beat. In the next motif, I will increase the dynamics and stretch the timing where the composer suggests sostenuto, meaning a passage to be played in a sustained or prolonged manner. It will help to increase the intensity. In the next 4 bars, we have the same melody with slight modifications. Unlike in the previous section, I will decrease the dynamics gradually towards the end of the phrase. Here in the last beat, Chopin reminds the accent on A natural in the 3rd beat. Even though we have been doing that since the beginning, perhaps he asks for a little more attention than usually. Here, I just like to reminisce the very beginning of the story for one last time. I will phrase it just like the first time. I suggest fading out very gradually and perhaps without slowing down too much. The composer doesn't suggest a ritenuto. However, we can stretch the timing just a little bit, as much as to manipulate the feeling of distance. This is how I like to design Prelude No. 6 by Frédéric Chopin. I highly recommend using, or at least checking, the Urtext editions of this prelude to having a clearer image of what Chopin intended. Now I will play the whole piece for you and implement everything I just explained to my interpretation. Here it goes. I will include my edition of the sheet music in the description, where you can see my fingerings. You can help me out by giving a like if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Later.